They shoot the shit. They shoot the shit. Shoot, shit. Shooting the shit with Chippa.
And if you guys are primed and ready to go, I'll just start this thingamabobber.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay. You get no seconds. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Shooting the Shit with Chippa, the only podcast where you get to hear me talk to people. And that's not true because it's one of 4 or sometimes 5 or 6 podcasts where you get to hear me talk to people. And with that, if you're not sick of me talking to people, I'm going to be talking to a couple of guys that I've talked to before on the show and whose show I've been on frequently. So before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody of my Patreon tiers. I now have a tier at $1, $5, and $15. And if you're on the $15 tier, I'm going to say your name on this podcast, just like the guys who I'm recording with tonight do. That'd be Mason, Christopher Finnick, my mother, Patricia Chipman, and Hugh K. Campbell Jr., who goes by Green Goblin on Twitter and was one of the earlier guests on the Talkbuster podcast. And because, you know, it's fun to just do things like this, this night's episode is brought to you by the Geeks With Shields podcast, your place for all things good and nerdy in this, the darkest timeline. You can listen to Ulric and Axle talk to all kinds of random people, especially me, so go check it out. And with that, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves for the second time. How we doing?
It is surreal to hear someone other than Ulric say the tagline. I love it, but it's odd.
It makes me think we should open a knick-knack store that just sells random things.
Anyway,
the darkest timeline.
We are the Geeks with Shields. Well, we're 2 of the Geeks with Shields anyway. The quote-unquote main 2, whatever that means. I'm Axel Wright, and as Lord Commander Ulric.
We are Legion.
Well, we're approaching Legion anyway.
We are Trapper Keeper. We are one.
We love Chris offered us to come back on and chat with him some more. Just an excuse for I feel like we've become friends with Chris, so we just chat and we're gonna record it.
Exactly. Why wouldn't you want to hear people with in-jokes talk to each other and not really be in on the in-jokes? Put it on the internet. That's what we'll
Isn't
do.
that the majority of podcasts already?
Shh.
Well, I feel like so far
this is the only one.
Oh, okay.
I feel like so far this trio's main in-joke has to do with Jurassic Park and E.T., and that was recorded and put out there, so...
That is true. Speaking of this being the only one or only thing like that, I want to give a shout out to my friend Tyler Gorman, who runs the Pumpkin Copter cast. It really struck me as super... It was just a cool way that he did his show because he runs a video game podcast. He's like, welcome to the Pumpkin Copter cast, the only video game show. And then just has dead air.
He does his with video, right? Because I watched you show up on his show.
Yeah, he does his over YouTube, like live recording. So it live streams it and then posts it to his YouTube channel later. So that's actually pretty cool. I like being on his show. He's local. He's actually the first person I ever was asked to sign an autograph for.
Really? That's cool.
I was in Target in Danvers, right up the street from here, and a guy turned around the corner and went, "This is going to be weird, but are you Chris Chipman?" And I went, "Yeah." And he's like, "Crap, I don't have my autograph book." And I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be awesome." and so he went and shuffled around his bag and had a Star Wars novel, and so I signed that. And then when we ran into each other at PAX, he actually had his autograph book. So me and my wife actually signed it then, and that was pretty cool.
That is awesome. I actually was recently... I love stories like that. I was recently at a convention with Chuck Huber. Do you guys know who Chuck Huber is?
Yeah.
No.
So he's, for Ulrich who doesn't quite know, Chuck Huber is a voice actor who voices Android 17 in Dragon Ball Z and Hiei and Yu Hakusho, my favorite show of all time. So seeing him was really cool, and he's a national treasure, I tell you. But so, like, at one point, a baby in the audience started crying, and he was like, "I've had 7 kids. I know how to handle it. Let me." And so he took the baby and played a game with it to comment. Anyway, point I'm bringing this up is he was telling.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like he was super chill guy, but he was telling a story about why he is his favorite character because when he first got into the voice acting business, he didn't realize like that it was as big as it was. So when his, people, the bosses, quote unquote, were like, "Hey, you want to go to Comic-Con?" And, for what you do, he thought he was going to be there, like, handing out copies of the DVD, trying to get people to pay attention to the show. Instead, they sat him down at a table, and we're like, "You're going to do autographs," and he's like, "No one's going to show up," and they went, "Look at all those people. That's the line for you," and he was just like, "What?"
That's wild.
Yeah, and he said it was full of like Yu Hakusho fans and people crying because they got to meet Hiei, and he thought that was the moment he realized that he had like a level of fame he didn't I love stories like that, is my point.
Oh, so do I. It's freaking great. So just to give everybody an idea of before we're going to get into the main show, so I'll give a preemptive of why these guys are here. I have been exposed to, but have never really sat down. I've kind of like watched from the side, the entire big thing that is Warhammer. I had friends that worked at the Gamers Workshop. I have a buddy that's still way into it, who was one of those guys that worked there that does all of our character painting for our characters we use in our D&D games we play. And I've always just been super interested in it, but I've never, there's not the Gamers Workshop around anymore, right? That I could just go to and like get in on a game, especially around here. So I tasked these guys with, I'm sure, the difficult and going to need to be done in more than one round, I'm sure, task of giving me a 101, like a Warhammer 101 introduction into, your favorite mythos of it, because there's a lot. So just, pick a cool bent, because I don't know any of them. So whatever will be interesting. And if we were to, say get together in a couple days and sit down and play a game, what I'd need to know, like about.
I'll definitely say before we get to that too, I like the Skyrim principle of like you can be a novice through master of something, and I would consider myself only like between an apprentice and an adept, and Ulric is like an adept when it comes to Warhammer. So we're not claiming to be experts or masters, but we are fans. And
that is a dangerous thing to label yourself, because the community will tear you down.
Yes.
Yeah, we learned that one of our first Warhammer episodes, my buddy Wretched came online, and I made the mistake of calling him an expert on the chaos, which he's not.
Oh,
and he
no.
never claimed to be, but he got a little attacked because of that.
Speaking of that, I'm going to have to get him on this show sometime. He's a blast.
Yeah, Richard's great. So,
anyway,
but before we get into that, you have a game for us, don't you?
Yes. So this will be, I think, the fourth time now, and I think only second, because for you guys, there's only 2 episodes where you could have heard me playing this game with people, and by the time this comes out, there'll only be about 3 or 4 where I've done it. But it's a new thing I started working into my podcasts. My buddy Jim and I at work on lunch came up with some movie games to play. One of the ones we've played that we haven't started turning into a real game yet, because it's more masterclass, as he puts it, because he doesn't know as much about directors and things like that as me, was a fun one called Director Speed Dating, where you'd have the 2 people sitting across from each other, and they'd each get a director, and they'd have to keep going back and forth with a timer to like write a script quickly, like Mad Lib style, using the 2 directors. So you'd have like Guillermo del Toro and Robert Rodriguez. And so first guy gets Robert Rodriguez, and it's a story of an underage girl. And then Guillermo del Toro, who is also a bug, and stuff like that. And so that one's in the preliminary stages of existing. But Right Quote Wrong Movie is the game I want to play with you guys tonight. And it's Cards Against Humanity style. You and me and Ulric and friendlies. No, and Ulric all have 10 cards with movie quotes in the actual movie they go with, because I'm assuming the people playing this game all won't know these quotes like I do. And we're going to randomly pick, because this is all through a random number generator in an Excel spreadsheet right now, a number, and a movie's going to pop up. And the person who's not the person guessing, because I actually have 3 players this time, so we can play it the real way. The other 2 guys will throw out a quote, and one of us, the guy who called out the movie, has to pick the quote that goes with that movie the best. And
are we just gonna say it to you, or
we're just gonna say it, because right now, I don't have like a anonymous way of getting that from you, but it's an honors system. We're not picking favorites here. It's
rock on,
at least of the people. And again, we'll also let the people listening to the episode vote as well. Is kind of the idea. So,
all right.
With that, do you guys have your quotes ready?
I do.
Awesome. So round 1, Ulric is it, and Ulric, pick a number between 3 and 145.
9.
And the movie is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. So, right? So, Axel, I will let you go first out of your 10 quotes. And again, just like with Cards Against Humanity, it's not necessarily the quote that would always win, but you know your friend, and I kind of know you guys. So, like, you're kind of reading the room and throwing something. Maybe it just has a funny in-joke to it, or whatever. So, let's go for it.
All right. Well, the one that sticks out to me, I don't know if this is going to land, but it made me kind of giggle just because I'm imagining a tomato saying it. But is there aren't evil guys and good guys. They're just a bunch of guys. Zero effect. I don't know why that worked for me. So
okay, so my quote is from 30 Days of Night, and I feel that this quote is so super serious that it almost doesn't go with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and that's what makes it funny. That cold ain't the weather. That's death approaching.
Ooh.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh, that's a tough one because those both work for very different reasons. Axel, this is a monologue of the tomato, saying that line is hilarious. But Chris, that would make a great tagline for the movie.
So what do you think?
By a hair. I'm going to go with yours, Chris.
Okay, so I take round one and we'll just keep tabs on our own. Okay. And I figure we'll each get 2 rounds is basically the way that I think this will work. Right. So I'm going to keep track right here. Chris, Axel, Ulric. Oh, the joys of Microsoft Excel.
We're engineers. We're very aware of charting things.
Yes. All right, here we go. Round 2, Axel. Mm-hmm. Leaving out number 9, a number between 3 and 145.
144.
Ooh.
It's 12 by 12.
Sunset Boulevard. Okay. And if none of us know this movie, it's all you can re-roll.
It's been a long time since I've seen Sunset Boulevard.
Okay. Re-roll. What do you want?
99.
Network. No shit.
Okay.
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah,
okay, there we go.
Love it.
Okay, and I'll let Ulric go first.
You play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die.
Oh, perfect. I'm going. What's that from? Ulric?
Phantasm.
Phantasm. Yes, I'm going to go in a similar vein.
Cheater! He knows that Phantasm is my favorite horror movie.
Well, anyway. This will be a fun one too. Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants. Well, I've got news for you, pal. You ain't leading but 2 things right now: Jack and shit, and Jack left town. Army of Darkness.
Okay, because the Army of Darkness quote is way more fitting with the most famous scene from Network, obviously. But I got to be basic and go with the Phantasm quote because it's Phantasm, and I love any recognition of it.
There ain't nothing wrong with that. That's called playing the room, man. That's called playing the room.
I just love any time it gets spoken because people don't talk about it. So
all right, so that's 1 for Ulric, and now it is my turn to be the picker. And 3 to 145. And the cool thing is that the sheet that has all the movies is buried. So I don't know what's about to pop up, which I think is great. And I let a buddy of mine at work for these pick the numbers for the quotes, and then he just gives them to me, and I send them to people. So I don't even know what quotes you guys have. It's great.
Works for me.
I'm gonna go with 86. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie.
All right. Oh, okay. Man. Okay.
So are you enjoying this?
Oh, this is awesome.
Because I'm enjoying the shit out of this right now.
Oh.
I got 2 really good ones. I'm not sure which one to use. All right. I think I got one.
Okay.
Oh, and I blame Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged.
Okay. Whichever one of you wants to go first.
All right, I'll go first. Well, I got a number. How do you like them apples?
Fantastic. All right.
I don't think I'll take a point for this. It's not funny. It's just that I think it actually is very appropriate, oddly enough. Do or do not. There is no try.
That's fantastic. I do have to go with Ulric on that one.
That's fine.
But
I
that was
wasn't
really
expecting
good.
to
That
take
was
it.
really good. All right. So back to Ulric. Ulric, besides 9, 99, and 86, 3 to
13.
145. 13.
Yeah, unlucky.
Bride of the Monster.
Bride of the Monster.
That would be a.
All right, I got it. I'm good.
That would be an Ed Wood film.
Okay.
Mine is get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape.
It's going to be really hard to top that one. All right, let's see what you got. I mean, let's see what I got. Should I say? Don't mind me. I'm losing my mind. Okay. Whoa, monster cock from. You know what they say about it's twoo.
Oh, God. I got to give that one to Axel just because that one, his line feels like it would be part of an Ed Wood film.
I agree.
I got a point. Yay!
You got a point. All right, so now it is Axel's turn.
42.
Ah, yes. The meaning of life, the universe, and everything. The Lone Ranger. Oof.
All right. Old one.
Ooh. Okay, I got it. Perfect one.
Go ahead.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this? This is my boomstick.
Yeah, that's damn good. I could also see Johnny Depp saying that in a really, really, really racially inappropriate voice.
I'm going to choose to see Bruce Campbell in a Lone Ranger outfit instead. So
that would be awesome.
Okay. I'll just go for... You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow. To have and have not.
I'm going to have to go with Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, I have a rough rest of my list here. All right, that's Ulric for 3. And now we come to me, even though it's going to be Ulric's game no matter what. And I will pick 56. Predator. Lay it on me, bitches.
Oh.
Oh, I got 2 that work really well. All right, I'm going to go with, just because I want to hear Arnold Schwarzenegger say this, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
I've got the feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yes,
Get us a chopper. Okay.
Let's see. Oh, I already used that one. Damn it. That would have been a good one. Okay. Then I'll just go with I Like the Way You Die, Boy. Django Unchained.
Oh, man. Yeah. Go with Ulric. Ulric.
All right.
Man, wow. Ulric, the winner. 4 to 1. So
that's
yeah,
fine. I haven't won a Cards Against Humanity type game in I don't know how long.
So that is right quote wrong movie for everyone out there, and I'm going to attempt to turn that into a real game. So feedback, let me know if you like it.
I love the concept, and I feel like once we have it in like card forms or in an app form, it'll be amazing. Exactly.
This is just spitballing right now, but man, just how much we were laughing during that made me happy.
And you can make expansions forever.
Oh yeah, especially you can do genre expansions.
Well, at the very least, just grab those. What is that? That famous list of like supposedly the quote unquote top 100 movie quotes. Just grab that. Grab some of those YouTube videos of like top movie quotes, and there's tons of material there. Just
think though, like you could have the Avengers pack. You could have the shitty DC movies pack.
Sad now.
What was that name? Anyway, so yeah, Warhammer.
Okay, so before we jump into Warhammer necessarily, you said that you had this kind of like passing relationship with it. It sounds like your passing relationship is with it primarily as the actual tabletop game.
Yes,
right?
and so back then when I saw people playing it, I didn't know the lore ran as deep. So that's what interested me. Is it's like, okay, I watched my friends play this, but I never played because at the time I went, wow, that looks expensive.
It is. That part hasn't changed.
And I'm assuming it's kind of similar in vein to a real-time strategy type game, but on a tabletop.
Well,
Is that
I've heard some people refer to StarCraft as essentially a toned down version of Warhammer, which isn't entirely incorrect.
So I don't know if, because I have a passing visual of what's going on there, I don't know if that's a good place to start, or if giving like a, and again, this can be interactive. I don't want you guys just to talk and have me go, yeah,
yeah. Well, obviously, you're having a conversation. That's why I was kind of wondering, like, where the good. Because, for instance, me, I don't actually play the tabletop game. I wouldn't mind playing it. I like Orcs a lot, but I got into it originally with a video game, Dawn of War, which is a PC RTS, and I still play Dark Crusade, which is the second expansion to Dawn of War.
And also, I don't know if this has any meaning to you, but Elijah Leonidas, who I've had on this show, said to me when I posted we were talking about it, please talk about Blood Bowl. I don't know what Blood Bowl is.
That's regular.
I can talk about Blood Bowl.
Yeah, that's got to be Ulric. So here's another thing. There's two different segments of Warhammer. There's Warhammer quote regular, and there's Warhammer 40K. One is fantasy oriented, and the other is science fiction oriented.
See, that answers my first question.
Technically, there's three now because there's Warhammer Old Fantasy, and now there's Warhammer Age of Sigmar, which is a whole mess.
Age of Sigmar was kind of like an update of. Okay, I'm not going to even touch.
You do not touch the Age of Sigmar Hornet's Nest.
Point is, I know practically.
Well, wait a minute, but if I turn this episode into a Hornet's Nest, that's like no press is bad press, right? So instead of your show getting.
You do not want the baggage that comes with AOS. The AOS debate, oh no.
All right, all of my knowledge is 40K. I know very little about regular Warhammer.
40K is the sci-fi, like robot costume people kind of thing. And then the prior is more of the
fantasy.
The Horus Heresy and that kind of stuff.
No, Horus Heresy is 40K. Actually.
Okay.
There's a lot of...
I see a lot of it and didn't know how it merged together. When I saw people play on tabletop, I really only ever saw them playing 40K.
Well, here's the interesting thing about 40K and regular. Even though I don't play tabletop, I know this much. I have a lot of friends who do play. There are a lot of pieces that you can use in either. Particularly like if you play Chaos, which are essentially Hell. Like a lot of the pieces can be used whether you're playing regular 40K, regular Warhammer or 40K. Same thing goes for like a lot of not a lot, but some of the orcs, the ones that don't have guns, essentially.
so at the like first principles level, you have the video games, you've got the lore, like books and everything else, and then the tabletop game. What's the like purpose of it? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there
originally
is it warring tribes? Is it what's quite going on? Like, what's the idea?
Okay, so I would say for 40K, right? If we're talking like spirit of it, almost sounds like we were talking about this like warring tribes concept. 40K, the phrase, and I'm gonna butcher the phrase right now, but the phrase is something like the future is. Oh man,
in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
Thank you. I knew I just couldn't. I was mixing it up with the Game of Thrones stupid phrase, but yeah. So that concept, right? In the grim dark future, there's only war. There's a few things that like very specific words that really latch onto the spirit of 40K, as far as I'm concerned. For instance, grim dark. Like normally, I'm not a fan of things that have the grim dark label because it means things are just being overly dark and edgy, and I'm not really into that. I'm kind of I think hope punk is the term, but Warhammer is one of the only cases where it really works because it leans so heavy into grimdark tonally that it's literally about this galaxy where things are basically as bad, as epic, and as brutal as they can possibly be. Hence why the other important word in that phrase is war. Like it's called Warhammer for a reason, and 40K especially, right, is like while there is bits of lore and stuff that are not necessarily about war, most of what you're coming at it from is a war perspective, how war is waged, who are the people waging wars, why are they waging wars, so things like that.
Interesting.
So just to kind of give you the basic overall stripped down version, the two biggest factions in the universe is the Imperium of Man, which is a theocratic fascist mega empire.
Oh, gee, I wonder what that's based on.
And the other side is the Forces of Chaos, which is a combination of nightmare spawned reality demons based on the most primitive human emotions and those who left the Imperium of Man because they want the freedom that provides.
But
Okay.
one of the benefits of Warhammer 40k's universe, though, is that it has a lot of factions that are quite large. Like, while the Imperium is inarguably the largest faction in the galaxy, at least, there are so many that, like, the Tyranids, which I could talk about later, probably have the most in the universe because they actually come from another galaxy. But like, there's only one little section of them in our galaxy. The orcs, there are like more orcs than any other species other than maybe human, but they're not unified. So there's all these kind of like, you find what works for you. You like elves? There's the Eldar, who are space elves. I hate the Eldar personally, but
Yeah, they're kind of boring.
Space elves just seems like we're just trying too hard. I don't know why. To me, it's just like wouldn't space elves just kind of be
They've
like
evolved past that, but on their very much surface level, they are. Fun fact about the Eldar, that was Robin Williams' army that he used to play, and he had voices for every one of them, and he would go to a little tiny hole-in-the-wall store in San Francisco and would play there, but his only contingent was, don't tell anyone I play there, and I'll keep coming here. And he called them the sissy gay space elves, and he had voices and characters for his entire army.
That's incredible. So to step back for a second and just say, for a guy who's most of my experience with tabletop gaming like this is Dungeons and Dragons and things that are spin off of that. So like Mouse Guard I've played and, other iterations. So when the type of world that is created in Warcraft, no matter what version, seems it's more multi-planet type of stuff, like StarCraft kind of. So what else sets it apart from like a Dungeons and Dragons type of approach? Does it have like a different approach to like what it takes, like what it pays attention to? Because Dungeons and Dragons is very individual character based.
Well, there's already and Ulric, you can back me up or shoot me down on this, but Warhammer in general on the tabletop and in the lore is a lot less individual based. There are, great figures, like particularly figures like the Emperor of Man and his Primarchs and, a handful of like, big named people and other factions. But generally speaking, it's not really about that. It's more about like, what's the word? Like entire movements of armies and stuff. Like when you're playing on the tabletop, you can have hero units, which are, or whatever you want to call champion. I'm not sure what the term is, but mostly it's about maneuvering your armies. And the things that happen in Warhammer happen on such a unbelievable scale. It's meant to be ridiculous. Like it is to an insane, unbelievable degree on purpose. So like when they say in a single battle on, one planet, millions are dying, it's not supposed to be like something that you can really wrap your head around. It's supposed to be ridiculously epic is kind of the
right, and
the thrust.
And that's where the with my limited background in this kind of stuff, that's where the real-time strategy, like you said, the StarCraft, but StarCraft seems to be Warhammer Light because there's definitely not millions of people dying in StarCraft, but that's the kind of idea that I was thinking when I was thinking about it.
Yeah, and Axel's kind of right in that in the lore, it's very much painted with broad strokes because the Imperium of Man is so big and because it's basically them versus everything else, because the big players are the Imperium of Man versus Chaos, but there's also countless alien races that the Imperium won't tolerate, can't tolerate, doesn't want to get along with anybody. So there's massive casualties on a daily basis. But on the tabletop sense, you really can get in depth with your models and make stories for them and background. I mean, I know a guy, he plays Chaos and he has a bunch of cultists and they're all individually named.
Nice.
So it all depends how much you want to put into it, especially at least from the hobby aspect. I mean, if you want to go in depth and create long backstories for your characters, you can. Or if you want this to be guardsman number, 110503, there's literally an army that consists of clones. They are just people cloned over and over again because they die in such numbers.
Also, you got to understand with the Imperium specifically that I don't know if it's their motto, but you'll see this phrase repeated a lot. Kill the heretic, burn the mutant, purge the unclean.
Oof.
It's like their credo. They're very xenophobic, like to the point where anything that's even remotely seemingly against humanity is the enemy and must be purged immediately. There's an entire concept called, is it not extremis, but something similar. I can't think of the word right now. Where a certain Space Marine
Exterminatus.
chapter, Exterminatus. Thank you. A certain Space Marine chapter. If a planet just seems lost to Xenos, essentially, they'll just raise the entire planet so it's no longer habitable. It's better than letting Xenos and demons, rampage through it.
Xenos, it's mostly for chaos infestation because here's the cool thing.
Do it for orcs too.
Yeah, because that's how we can get rid of orcs, because they're a spore. No, literally, in the universe, they're spores. They sprout out of the ground.
Well, for the record, right, Ulric here is the Imperium. That's his thing, particularly a certain space.
No, I would have never have expected that.
Yeah, he's Ultramarines, right? That's your go-to?
That's my go-to.
And I'm orc. Like, orc is my choice. My
now,
go-to.
are the orc Earth-based, or are they...
No, actually, so
alien.
Here's the thing. When it comes to the lore, right, it's got that kind of... Here's one of the reasons why it's StarCraft Light. Without getting into too much detail, way back before humanity was like, even making fires, there was a race of beings that were... I forgot. The orcs call them like the brain boys and stuff.
The
but I can't remember what... The old ones, thank you. They're basically like eldritch beings that seeded life, and they were at war with the Necrons, who are basically, think of them as the Skynet in space. They're they're Terminators essentially.
Yep.
And so, in order to fight the Necrons, this race, the old ones, created two lesser races. Well, quote unquote, one that was supposed to be of the mind, and one that was supposed to be the like kind of perfect body. The mind one turned out to be the Eldar, which is why they have crazy psychic powers. And then the physical one was the orcs. So they were genetically created and engineered by the old ones to be creatures of war. So that it's built into their very, like, the fabric of their being. They are literally made of spores. So if one orc lands on your planet, they'll just drop spores into the ground, and after a span of time, orcs will start popping out of the ground, basically fully grown and already with an instinct and drive to kill and just wage war, because that's what they were made to do.
This all sounds really friggin' cool.
Yeah, they also come with an innate knowledge.
Sorry.
They also come born with an innate knowledge to do whatever task it is they need to do.
True, like the ones who... Well, I could go into detail on that a lot, but the ones who need to quote-unquote build things, they don't learn. They just know how to do it. It's built into their structure.
It would have been really cool to know all of this when I was watching my buddies play this.
But one last thing, because I feel like I could go on about the orcs for a long time. Maybe we'll do that in another episode. But one of my favorite things about the orcs that you gotta understand is they aren't not psychic. Just because the Eldar are like the psychic ones doesn't mean that the orcs can't be psychic. What they have is called the Waha, which is a shared psychic field that they are all part of. And the more orcs that are in proximity to each other, the more power they draw from the Waha, to the point where it's one of the most famous things about Warhammer orcs is that if they believe something hard enough and there's enough of them together, it will just be true. One of the best examples of this is that all orcs believe that if you paint something yellow, that when it explodes, it'll explode bigger. And then that happens. That is true when orcs do it. Orcs' technology, for instance, is ramshackle and made from, like junk, essentially. But they believe it will work, so it works. If you take an orc's gun, you see him firing, you kill the orc, and you pick it up and try to use it, it won't work. Like, it's not actually based in any science. It's just it's
based on sheer will.
Exactly.
Oh, that's fucking cool.
So most orc tech operates on this principle. Actually, it was an intentional from the old ones so that they're like an army that was fighting the orcs couldn't resupply themselves with the orcs' weapons.
Right, it's like an entire army full of, guns that are tied to someone's DNA. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, but anyway, I think I've gone about the orcs a lot. If we're having a first session, a 101 session, you gotta focus on the Imperium because the Imperium is really the main player in this Warhammer 40K's universe. And I feel like if you're gonna talk about the Imperium, you got to start with the Emperor because the Imperium, so much of it is based on this one great figure in the lore. So there's a number like. The entirety of the Imperium is based on this one guy who was called the Emperor of Man. And where he came from is kind of hotly debated. There's a few different things get into that. I like the one that, thousands of years ago, actually tens of thousands because it takes place in the year 40,000 some. But anyway, like a bunch of shamans came together and sacrificed themselves together to reincarnate all their souls into one being. But that's not like canon or anything. That's just one of the
most widely accepted theory currently.
I guess, but there's also some theories that he is an old one, or at least was a creation of the old ones. Point is, the Emperor of Man has been around since caveman times.
But the dawn of time.
Yeah, but he stayed in the background, just slowly pushing humanity in the right direction for most of its time. Until
quote unquote right direction.
Yeah, what he believed was the right direction. And he's basically immortal. He's this super powerful psychic, and eventually, once humanity had started spreading across the stars, the Emperor took control and created the Imperium of Man proper. And there's a lot of details I'm just glossing over here because the Emperor's lore is thick and deep and insane. But so the point is, he gets all of the Empire together. He has this crusade where he wants to bring this one Empire of Man across everything. But what's interesting about him is he's completely secular. He believes that religion is inherently destructive, and so part of what he is spreading on his crusade is essentially science dogma and belief in.
It's called the Imperial Truth, and the idea is there are no gods, there is only science. And the reason he kind of does that is because there are gods. They are the Chaos Gods, and they feed off people's belief. And he's hoping he can starve them out once and for all if no one believes in them.
Yeah. So anyway, Emperor's going around spreading this. He uses his own DNA to create a special set of 20 warriors that are called the Primarchs that are going to be his instrument of his will. And the Horus Heresy, which you've mentioned several times, is one of the most interesting to read about events in all the Warhammer 40K. Horus, the guy is a guy's name, is the first of the Primarchs. Think of him as Lucifer. He to the Emperor's god. So he is the favorite among the Primarchs. He is the Master General. What's the term? A War Master? I think
he's the War Master.
Yeah, he's the War Master of the Emperor's armies. And he leads all the other Primarchs, essentially. But through a series of events involving another Primarch who is insanely
there's a lot of other factors that kind of go into it. Read the Horus Heresy if you're interested.
Yeah, point is, Horus
long
gets
story
turned
short,
to chaos.
daddy issues.
Yes.
No joke. Basically, the whole big triggering event is the Emperor's all right, I have to go back to Earth to complete a secret project. And Horus goes, but why? I can't tell you. Why not? Because I don't trust you. And procedural events fall out from there. It all kind of ties back.
It's less that he didn't trust him and more that he trusted him to do what he needed to do and just take orders.
Yeah, and they've kind of come back around to that, and now there's a whole competing theory of how much did the Emperor really know, and we can get all into that. But most of the Primarchs that kind of turned against the Emperor did it because he was a shit dad.
Well, he was more concerned with his people in general than his 20 sons. But anyway, so Horus goes to Chaos, gets half of the Primarchs on his side, and the Horus Heresy is the subsequent civil war between Horus and his Chaos Primarchs and their legions, and the Emperor and his loyalists.
And technically, awesome. There are 21 sons.
Oh yeah, okay, correct.
But Alpha Legion has twins.
Yeah, so the Horus Heresy is the biggest event in the Imperium's history, because before the Horus Heresy, the Imperium was unstoppable, essentially. There was no force in the galaxy that could really stand up to them. But the Horus Heresy destroys the Imperium. Like it weakens it so much. Most of the Primarchs are dead or missing by the end of it. And
Jesus.
And the Emperor is stuck. Okay, so this takes a little more explaining, but the way that faster than light travel works in the Warhammer 40k universe is there's something called the warp. Think of it as another dimension where the Chaos Gods live.
Dimension of thoughts and emotions and nightmares.
Exactly.
So real quick, when, and again, we don't need to go into the full history of this stuff, but like when the tabletop game started, did that start when the lore was fully established?
The tabletop game was kind of smashed together, random bits and pieces taken from other IPs. And if you look, because it started back in 1984, I believe.
Okay.
So if you look at the first edition of Warhammer to like maybe the fourth edition, so much lore has been done away with, deleted. There are characters that no longer exist. The Primarchs weren't really established. I think the Horus Heresy wasn't even mentioned as a concept until like the third edition.
Okay.
And then it was like back in the mid 2000s, they went, you know what? We should flesh this out and write a whole story around it. And that's when they started this 60-some book series. It's just now coming to an end.
That helps, because like if you're, I could just see, again, there's lore with Dungeons and Dragons that goes with each edition and everything, and there's certain characters that are just there. But when you play your game, it's kind of in an existing timeline. You might jump into a war that's well known or whatever. But I could just see, people trying to keep up with this sitting down, and it's like when you play a game of Warhammer, are you sitting down playing a pre-scripted battle from the stories, or is it just kind of, no, you're setting this up and the stories are just kind of there to back up the characters and the lore?
The great thing is you can do both.
Like,
that's awesome.
To do it.
Yeah, there are people and
I didn't mean to stop you. I was just piecing all that together in my head and going, Jesus, like imagine if I have a legion where I've got these two Primarch guys and this, and I'm out there fighting my buddies, and then they're dead now. Oh fuck.
No. Like when you said you wanted an introduction to Warhammer, that's kind of why I need an entry point, man. This thing is monstrous.
That's why for me,
this is going exactly how I wanted it to. This is helping me a lot.
All right, well, I can cap this off pretty quick to the main thing I wanted to get to. So at the end of the Horus Heresy, so the warp, right? It's how they travel faster than light by entering the warp, and then they travel through it. But the problem is that since the warp is a realm of nightmares and chaos and emotion, that if you try to travel through the warp unprotected, you'll come out either insane or a demon or
not at all.
Or not at all. Yeah.
I just have Event Horizon in my head.
Here's the funny thing.
Yes, that.
Okay, people are convinced that Event Horizon is a backdoor 40k movie that just never got made.
Oh, because shit.
Yeah, it is.
The concept is insanely similar.
Yes. Just change hell for the warp, and everything that happened is pretty much what would happen if you went into the warp.
I love the shit out of that movie. It's
a weird one.
It's like probably the only great thing Paul W.S. Anderson even came close to making.
Yeah, I want it to be redone as an actual 40k movie.
Use that as your basis. So now there are certain ways to travel through the warp without going insane, essentially, which involves psychers, like giving protection, but mostly involve the God Emperor himself. Like he's a
lighthouse.
So the thing he was developing that he wouldn't tell Horus about was essentially he was trying to access old Eldar gateways so that it was a way of going faster than light without having to use the warp. But since the Horus Heresy happened, it kind of destroyed the gateway. So instead, he ended up being really injured in the last fight with Horus. So he gets on this throne, which is, the golden throne where he is, that's filled with these machines that just keep him alive. And while he sits there, he sends his mind out in the warp to function as a beacon so humans can travel through the warp without, too much fear. There's still a basic level of danger, but as long as he is there, he allows them to do this without, all dying essentially. And that happened back like 10,000 years before the 40K. So the Emperor's been in this chair for like 10,000 years and decaying. So like when you see him now, he's basically a skeleton in armor, but he's still quote unquote alive. In fact, they have to sacrifice 1,000 psychers to the throne every day to feed him, quote unquote.
And we should clarify, a psyker in this universe is someone who can manifest psychic abilities by drawing energy from the warp.
Now, the reason all this background is important is because even though the Emperor was like, there are no gods, science is what's important, because he is literally the only reason that people can travel through the warp, and now he is not around to actually control how the Imperium has moved, he has become the god of mankind. There is this cult. Yeah, this cult has risen around him, the cult of the Emperor. And so he's
seen a cult anymore.
Now it's a straight up religion, yeah, but it was originally a cult, obviously.
Well, it's one of the 4 pillars of the Imperium.
Yeah, so now it's like if you're quote unquote part of the Imperium and you say anything that is heretical towards the Emperor, they will just cut you down as a heretic. Like,
damn.
Yeah, so that is the reason I told you that whole story, is to give you an idea of like how the Emperor shaped how the Empire formed, and why now it's in this huge decline. It's this theocracy where everyone's like, the Emperor is, what's most important, and we don't actually bother coming with new technologies because only the technology that was around when the Emperor was around is what's important. And so yeah, the Imperium has been in decline for some time, and it's why, even though it's the largest, most spread out, and most populous, it's being beset on all sides by all these other factions. So,
and they've kind of started to turn it around in the recent lore, because they actually started bringing back Primarchs, because we haven't had Primarchs in the game forever, unless you're playing, the Heresy, when everyone has Primarchs. But now they're trying to bring Primarchs back, and one of the first ones they brought back was my man, Robate Gilliman, and he was like, "Oh, what'd you do to my dad's kingdom? Everything's fucked up. Okay, just give me 5 minutes. I'm going to start trying to fix this. God damn it."
And with the exception of Horus, who doesn't exist at all anymore because the God Emperor deleted him from existence, all the other ones that turned, they're all like demon princes now.
Yeah, they went to specific gods and got super juiced on demon goodness.
Anyway, so that was a lot of just like loose lore thrown at you. So, like, what's on your mind just hearing all of that?
Well, what's on my mind is I want to like read all this now, which is probably bad for my free time. Man, so there's a lot going on there, and you said this has been going on since the 80s?
Yep.
That's longer than I thought, because I had, in my mind, it had just kind of blown up in the early 2000s. So, do the video games cover the same lore as the books, or are they about specific battles or specific
they're more specific. So that Dawn of War game that I told you about that got me into it is about, so remember I mentioned the Necrons, who are like space Terminators? So the Necrons aren't really quote unquote currently active. Their entire thing is, if they're losing a battle, they just teleport away and then go to sleep and wait for whatever the force is to die or go away. Then they resurrect, essentially. So they are asleep on these what are called tomb worlds, where the Necron are basically stored. So the plot of Dawn of War, the PC RTS game, was that a tomb world was found. So these Necrons are awakening from it, and suddenly a bunch of like other forces show up, like one of the Space Marine chapters. So think, the Blood Ravens, I think is what they are.
Yeah,
like
the Blood Ravens show up.
They show up.
Everyone kind of shows up for whatever reason on this one.
An Orc warlord shows up, bringing his orcs with him. And some Eldar show up because basically they're ancient enemies of the Necron. So they're like, all right, we got to deal with this Necron infestation. Chaos show up because they're like, we want to have the Necron tech and any other tech we find here. And so the plot of Dawn of War is just all of these races trying to vie for this one planet. So
the games are a good introduction, but in terms of lore, not your friend, because they play really fast and loose. And
but they're a good way to expose you to what the game is like, though, and let you figure out like what you gravitate towards. Because, for instance, you might find out play Dawn of War, you might find out that you really like the Tau. And so then now that you've played the game, you're like, oh, I like this race, so I'm going to go research them and see what their lore's like.
Now that you say that, so do the PC and console games, you have a choice of who you play as, or are they?
Depends on the game.
Depends
like
on the game.
In Dawn of War, you do have a choice. You pick which one you want and try to take over the world. But one of the more famous games from the last decade or so was on Xbox 360. I think there was Space Marine, where you played as a Space Marine. So
9 times out of 10, you're going to play as a Space Marine.
Right, that seems to make sense. I'm hearing this, and it's like I kind of almost wish that all of the money and time Ridley Scott spent on Prometheus and that other alien movie, he just went ahead and made some Warhammer movies. Because that would have been kind of
cool. The time is coming. I
love the concept of a Warhammer movie, but we talked about this. We had Lore Master of Sotek, who is like all about regular Warhammer. Like we had him on our podcast a while back, and we were talking about the concept of a Warhammer or Warhammer 40K movie. And because of the epic grand scale of these things, we're like, I mean, we could do it now, but it's a pretty niche market still, and it'd be pretty expensive. So it's like, fingers crossed.
I don't think it is as niche as people want it to be.
That's fair. Or maybe a TV show.
See, they've got a YouTube series in the works.
Oh, cool. All right. I'd watch that.
No, this last couple of years, they have really made a push into the pop culture. I mean, we have Funko Pops now. We're getting a line of action figures. We got 2 Munchkin games.
They made a Munchkin game?
They've got 2, both for Warhammer 40K and Warhammer AOS.
Oh, I love Munchkin.
Yeah, so they are making a big push into the cultural zeitgeist going, hey, here's a thing called 40K. Give me all your money.
So I really do like the idea. I had thought, just my ignorance towards it, that the difference between Warhammer and 40K was more. I didn't know that 40K had kind of the mix of some of the fantasy characters and kind of Space Marine, Halo kind of looking stuff. So that's really cool. I had thought that there was a clear line of, oh no, this is the fantasy one and this is the sci-fi one. I like the idea of there being a mix.
There isn't, but a lot of aesthetics are shared. Like demons are the same across both universes because the warp unites the universes.
Yeah. So by the way, as a very quick rundown, there are a lot of races, but I'd say there's like 8 primary races to pay attention to, and they are humans, the Imperium of Man, as we described. Orcs, spelled with a K, which we've also already described. The Forces of Chaos, which are demons and stuff like that, led by 5 demon gods. Well, there are more, but 5 main ones.
There are 4. Who's the 5th? We're at 4. Where are you getting the 5th one?
Well, there's a 5th one that's been a big deal in the codexes lately that's supposed to be like the representation of anarchy, essentially.
Malal is not in the codexes. Everyone tries to say Malal's in the codex. Malal's not in the codex.
I'll accept that. Anyway, then there's the... Then there's the Eldar, which we described as being space elves. The Dark Eldar, which even though they're an offshoot, they are pretty much their own thing. Think of them as, I don't know,
they're
BDSM elves. So they're very rapey. Yeah,
they are extremely rapey.
The
skin suit very.
Yeah. Then there's
what
the
was
Necrons.
They wear skin suits.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, Dark Eldar are messed up. Anyway, the Necrons, which are the space Terminators, then the last 2 are the Tau, which are the youngest race in the Warhammer universe, being only like 6,000 years old. They're basically space communists, but there's also kind of an like a 1984 Orwellian is what I meant to say, Orwellian mind control thing going on there. And then there's the Tyranids, which are. Have you seen Oh, why is it suddenly escaping me? The
Borg meets Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers. Thank you.
Oh yes, that's all I've been thinking about this whole time.
That's how you describe the Tyranids. They are Borg meets Starship Troopers.
Yeah, because they're basically
all-consuming.
They're insectoid, kind of, but they're also kind of like lizard. They're organic and they're completely animalistic, and their goal is to absorb organic matter. That's all they want to do. But those are the main races of 40K.
Nice. And funny thing is, there's subdivisions within those. Like I think there's 8 separate subdivisions within the Imperium of Man, and there's various orc tribes. It breaks down very much from there. And again, better about that this later edition because they want more money. They're like, hey, I want to play this niche army. And Games Workshop's like, okay, here you go.
Well, so you've heard the term Space Marine, obviously. So
Yes.
before getting into it, what do you know and or think Space Marine means in context of Warhammer?
I don't really know. I would assume it's somebody from the Imperium of Man that is leaving Earth to go fight these other legions instead of fighting ground war on Earth. That's
Okay.
kind of where my brain is going. But
Well, see, that's what I figured, and because when you hear Space Marine, I think there's a predilection to think about things like Halos, Spartans, right? But no, not at all. Space Marines mean a very specific thing in Warhammers because there are warriors in the Imperium who are basically that, but they're not Space Marines. They're just Imperium soldiers essentially. Space Marines specifically are 21 chapters. There's actually more because there's like offshoots and stuff, but there's primarily a chapter per Primarch, where each of the Primarchs, remember, their DNA came from the God Emperor, so then they would essentially use their DNA to take chosen humans and start genetically modifying them to make them
So
more like
imagine they're about 10 feet tall, breathe in space, spit acid, drink blood, have two
Getcha.
hearts, multiple lungs.
And
They were
because
designed-
each chapter is from a different Primarch, they have their own sets of rules, their own
Yeah, there's
traditions,
own
their own cultures.
subcultures. For example, I play Ultramarines. They are very Greco-Romantic styled. They are very much of, all right, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to do this. All right, let's go kick ass. Very
Whereas
organized by the number.
Whereas most people tend to think that Ulric's going to be a fan of the Space Wolves, because Space Wolves are essentially super Vikings who
They're
come
space
from a planet.
Vikings.
Yeah.
Their planet is literally called Fenris. They call the Emperor the All-Father. They have wolf
Nice.
priests. They cast runes. They have big beards, and they look like they jumped off the cover of a Monomarth album.
Yeah. So the idea of bringing this up, right? Space Marines are the most recognizable image for Warhammer, but because Space Marines themselves are all these chapters, which Space Marine chapter you choose has like a huge difference from each other. And they're even different from because the Space Marine chapters operate kind of autonomously. While they are pro Imperium of Man, they will clash with the Imperium if they don't believe the Imperium is behaving in a way they should.
Well, nobody
interesting.
has authority over them because there's kind of this big hierarchy of everything. But the Space Marines kind of exist outside this of, we can do whatever the fuck we want. You don't get to tell us what to do. And I mean, typically they kind of try and go with it, but by and large, most of them just do what they want as their own autonomous collective.
That's super cool. So
Yeah.
So you said, Ulric, you play as the Ultramarines,
Yes.
and then Axel, you don't play the tabletop at all, or
I haven't. I've thought about it. I've looked at the pieces a lot, but mostly I prefer the video games just because collecting. I have a thing, and I don't know if there's a word for this, but I don't like matter, like stuff.
I get
around
that.
me.
I get that.
Yeah. So I don't like collectible card games, for instance, because even though I love playing the game, I hate the collecting part. And so I will probably eventually get into Warhammer tabletop just because I feel like I'm being pulled into this black hole of it. But right now
it's an interesting aside to that because you get Lego and Ulric doesn't, but you're not a collector.
Correct. I love
Because you're
playing
an
with Legos.
engineer.
I don't like owning them though.
Yes,
I'd
I
love
get
to
you.
play
I
with them
get you.
at someone else's house.
No, I get you. So what I was going to say is, just to get my mind into it, of course, because there's millions of different ways we could do this. Let's say, the short version of if you two were going to play a tabletop game against each other. Is that work? Is it a 2-player thing, or is it like?
Yeah, it can be 2 players. It can be 4 players.
So let's
So theoretically, let's say I'm coming.
create a scenario. Like, tell me what you guys would play as and what you'd have available to you for physical pieces on a table. You know what I mean?
Ulric will take most of this, but I will say that I'm the kind of person that if we're coming at this, right, if me and Ulric decide, hey, let's play a game, I'm going to say, all right, then let's say we're on planet Omnis or something like that. There's an orc infestation led by my warlord, who I have named Golrock Mekreka, because orcs all have names like that, and that's my chosen name for my warlord. And so Golrak Mekreka is spreading across this planet, and the Ultramarines have been dispatched. At least this section of them, this legion of Ultramarines, has been dispatched to deal with the orc infestation. And so that's our scenario. And we can say that the specific scenario is this is the initial battle where, like, there's an orc encampment, Ultramarines land nearby, boom. And then we'd have, usually if we are, have money or a location, we're going to have a, like, physical kind of table that is itself built with, trees and
and it's got
water.
It's got like hills and I've seen that. But is there a standardized size, like a grid to that those have to be, or can can it be like a football field size if you fucking wanted it to be?
Well, you got a couple different games. Most of them operate on it's like a 4x6. I think it's the average table size.
That's what I've seen. Yeah.
There's a smaller one if you want to do it, Kill Team, which is I think as small as 4x4, and that works on a much smaller scale. But typical 40K is about 4x6. If you wanted to do it on football field, then you're playing what's called Apocalypse, which is literally bring everything you have, and they're coming with a new edition of that.
Just Google image search like Warhammer 40K Apocalypse, and you'll see pictures of tables covered in miniatures, and not all of them are very tiny. They're like, you'll see like 12 tanks right next to each other, and Titans, are actually, we just saw Godzilla King of Monsters. A Titan's like that, like a mech that big.
So no, they just announced a new version of Apocalypse, which I'm super excited for because I've always wanted to play Apocalypse, and my collection is big enough I can play Apocalypse. And Games Workshop is for the big release of that in their Warhammer World in England. They are going to set the world record, or attempt to set the world record, for the largest game of 40K ever played. So look forward to that.
That's one of each awesome race present. I'll be upset otherwise.
So let's get back to it then.
Okay.
What would you have at your disposal for like a 4x6 game if you two were going to play?
Well, standard game. So we've got the planet. We've drawn up the mission. This Axle's described as a narrative game. So we've kind of got a story. We've kind of okay, these are the objective. This is the objective. We put out our terrain. Ruins, buildings, whatever. Average size game is going to be about 1,500 points, which is going to be about 3 hours worth of play, give or take.
Yep.
Axle's playing orcs, and orcs are what's called a horde army, which means
I'm coming with a bucket full of miniatures and dice.
They're cheap. They really can't hit the broadside of a barn, so they're relying on their mass numbers. Right. So he's going to have a lot of little orc boys and trucks and whatnot to transport them, maybe some tanks.
I have a friend who does play orcs, and he said that at one point he literally did fill a bucket with all the dice he required, overturned it on the table, and said, I'm pretty sure I hit.
Now, so that answers the question. So it's dice-based?
Yes.
And
it's got a really simple number.
What kind of dice?
This system has streamlined it a lot, so it's almost all D6. I don't think there's anything but D6 in there anymore.
All right. So do you get assigned like a level of specifications like hit points and things like you would in D&D, or is it different scoring system?
Every unit has stats across the middle. It's going to have their movement in inches, like how far they can move. Mm-hmm. It's going to have their weapon skill, which is going to say 1 + 2 + 3 +, which is you have to roll higher than that, and that is what you have to roll for them to hit in close combat. You have ballistic skill, same thing. That's what they have to hit at range. Their strength, which affects how hard they hit. Their toughness, how hard they can get hit. Their wounds, how many wounds they take, and their save, how what the value of. You have to roll higher than. It's a lot like D&D. I mean, I haven't played a lot of D. I haven't played D&D in a while. They're both very similar.
Well, remember that D&D is originally based off tabletop wargaming, but Warhammer is straight up a tabletop wargame.
Yep, and I just only having seen them play it before I got into D&D, I just wanted to calibrate in my head off of what I know, Yeah.
So since I play Space Marines, they're a little more expensive, but they're a lot tougher and they hit a lot harder. So I'm probably going to have maybe half the troops that Axle has. Because he's going to be operating in blocks of 30-man squads. Like orcs, that's their average squad is about 30.
Now,
Or Space Marines.
Do you assign a quantity of soldiers to a single soldier character, or is it 1 is 1?
It works like one squad will have, how many the max is. So, like, for example, if I run a basic squad of tactical Marines, it's minimum of 5 men, maximum of 10 men.
Gotcha.
And they all have, you get X amount of attacks per dude, depending on what it says on the data sheet. So then, we have the deployments and the mission starts. We roll to see who goes first. And then it goes, I get my thing of movement, shooting, close combat if I'm in close combat. And then, it goes over to Axle. He does the same thing. We punch it out. We shift strategies. We use weapons. We do all these things. Like I said, this edition is such a great edition to get into because it is so much simpler than the last couple editions when you had a literal chart you had to hold up.
D&D has done the exact same thing. I played it at PAX, and I hadn't played D&D since 4th edition, and I think they're at like 5th edition 0.5 or something. And they streamlined it all. So your character sheet, like a thing that used to be 5 different subsets, is just one thing now. And it's like, all right, that makes that a lot easier. I roll, and it could be one of these 5 things. Okay.
I think we used to have like 30-some pages of special rules.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. That has gone away. You have it's literally now a little fold-out binder that has the core rules and your codex, which is your special, rule book for your army. That just says, hey, these are the rules that apply to your army. And this is what they do on the little character sheet. So it's no flipping to the back of the book. There's not a lot I miss about the last edition. I don't think there's anything I miss about the last edition. It was very dense and complex and hard to get into.
Funny, because earlier I mentioned the Tau, and Ulric audibly showed his disdain. Part of the reason why a lot of players hate the Tau, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but on the tabletop, they are like the longest range of any other races.
Oh, all right.
So they just murder you before you reach them.
Last edition, they were just so broken because last edition, they could literally shoot you from across the other side of the table before anybody could get into range. Unfortunately, they got a hard nerf this edition. I mean, they've kind of balanced it, but this edition, they are really getting, kind of beat up on.
That's awesome. So this is super cool because, number one, I've realized that you guys know a crap ton, and I'm going to learn a crap ton. And I think that was a good 101 for me, and I know that we've been going for a little more than an hour, so I think we should do this again.
I would love to. I will say that for anyone out there who wants a more, we're going to call it educated lesson on Warhammer, like very good detail, look up a YouTube channel, Luetin09. It's like Luetin09. He does these hour and some long videos where he goes deep dives into lore. It's one of my favorite things on YouTube. And if you want almost lessons, like college lectures on sections of the lore, he's my go-to.
That's awesome. If you want a humorous approach, go watch If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device.
Now, for you, Chris, if you want us to just keep talking with you about it, I would love to do that. So.
I would love to too, because I feel like I'm contributing to the direction this goes, even though I don't know a ton, and it's making me excited. I'm actually I can picture this stuff and envision it, and I like the lore, so I want to talk about more. But I will say, what just happened? I just heard like a smack, 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 kapow.
It wasn't me.
I don't know.
All right, it was weird. Anyway, what was I going to say? I will, because we have fans that know that we're recording this now, give a tiny bit of time to explain or talk about Blood Bowl, because someone thinks I need to know what that is.
Oh, go ahead, Ulric.
That's Leonidas, Elijah from an earlier episode of Shooting the Shit.
So, Blood Bowl is one of the many specialist games that Games Workshop has put out. And it is essentially football played in the old fantasy universe. There's a dwarf team, there's a dark elf team, there's a high elf team, there's an orc team. all the fantasy races have a team and they play football. And it's made a great resurgence here recently. Like, they brought it back. It's got a great video game if you kind of want to see if you're interested in it. But it's football, but way more punchy, if that makes any sense. It's very turn-based. I said my main experience with it is the video game and seeing the models. It is a lot of fun. It is very tongue-in-cheek. They just released the Halfling team, who come out playing with cooking pots because that's their whole thing. They like to eat.
That's awesome.
And yeah, Slagathor is asking me to mention the orc cheerleaders.
Hi, Slagathor.
Which, yeah, that's also a thing. Like I said, Blood Bowl 2 is a fantastic game if you want to see how the game functions. And if you're interested, go pick up the game. It's 2 players. It's relatively cheap. It's a great introduction into the hobby, especially the painting and the assembling. And it's really well supported right now.
By the way,
That's awesome.
that painting thing, that's one of the things that's, it's very time consuming, but it's very fun. And as an orc player, I know that if I were to get the, miniatures, what you paint them actually has an effect on what they do, because that's how orcs function.
Yeah, orcs think colors do things, and because they will it to be, it's willed to be. Actually, my buddy Brian, who used to work at Gamers Workshop, I got a Horus Heresy character from the Gamers Workshop experience or whatever, Gamers World or Warhammer World. In England. He went to England for work and brought me back one, and I'm going to sit down with Brian and we're going to paint it up. Make it looking nice. Yeah.
Now, there's some cool models from the Horus Heresy line. It's just
this one.
I don't have
some
time to learn
librarian.
Unfortunately,
I know which one that
librarians are creepy.
Yeah.
Librarians are awesome. You shut your mouth.
They're creepy though. Come on, admit it.
They're cool. They can harness the power.
Yeah, my favorite character in the entire Warhammer verse has a model, and it sucks. So
yeah,
that's a bummer.
My favorite character is an orc named Gazkul Thraka, who's also known as the Prophet of Gork and Mork, who are the gods of the orcs, and I'll tell you more about them next time.
Yeah, no, we'll do this again because 1, I like having you guys on, and 2, I'm learning a lot, and I like to learn, especially about fun, geeky stuff.
Plus, as an excuse to force ourselves back onto your show.
Oh no, I'll have you guys on anytime. You know that. So with that, I'll wrap this one up because I know that we all got to get going. But I'd really like to thank you guys again for coming on and give you a chance to plug anything you want to plug before we get going.
Okay. Well, as we were introduced at the beginning, we do a podcast called Geeks with Shields. We talk all things nerdy, geeky, everything in between. I think we've got 3 different episodes up covering various aspects of 40K. We've changed the format, and we don't go as in-depth because it's really huge. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Podbean.
Are we on Podbean now?
We are on Podbean.
Sweet.
Or at least by the time this is recorded, we will be on Podbean.
Oh, okay, sweet. If you're on it right now, I was just going to go subscribe to you right now.
Sweet. Yeah. You can find us on the social medias at Geeks with Shields.
You've got the Twitter and the whatnot. I've been contractually obligated to push SoundCloud in all our episodes. Now I can push something else with Podbean.
We are looking at expanding. But yeah, find us on all the things.
That's awesome. So thank you guys again for, 1, being my friends, and for being on this again, and for having me on yours. And until next time, thank you for shooting the shit with Chippa.